All of these steps are going to be difficult. That's why all of them will require Democrats, independents, and Republicans to work together.
That, of course, the President of the United States yesterday talking about his budget, talking about cooperation on a very difficult fiscal matter, shortly before he issued his veto threat against the GOP proposals, and followed by a statement by Majority Leader Steny Hoyer saying, if the government shuts down, it's on the Republicans, not the Democrats. All right, Jake Tapper, ABC's senior White House correspondent, is there for all of that. We're going to find the meaning behind the rhetoric right now. He joins us. Jake, good morning.
Hey, Fred, how are you?
Good. I'm just curious, as you're watching this unfold and you're listening to the rhetoric, is this sounding more and more like 1995, or is there a different spin in 2011?
Well, I do think that the government shutdown threat is less likely just because I think Republicans don't feel like that was a movie that played out very well for them. But they definitely seem to be on some sort of collision course. And I asked the president at the press conference yesterday if he was willing to compromise, if he was willing to engage some of the spending cuts that Republicans were pushing, House Republicans were pushing. And he seemed to suggest that the door was open, but that he was not necessarily very enthusiastic about what they were pushing. He kept on talking about how it needed to be done for the right reasons, with a scalpel, not a machete, not just to score political points. And then, of course, a few hours later, he issued the veto threat, which he must have known about at the time, since that continuing resolution he threatened to veto came out on Friday night.
But of course, in December, he was just as adamant about not extending the Bush tax cuts, and he caved on that. Who do you think blinks first right now?
Just on the spending cuts and the continuing resolution bill?
Yeah.
I think that Republicans probably feel like they have a good issue right now, just because they are trying to cut spending, as their voters, as their constituencies largely told them that they wanted them to do, and President Obama is issuing a veto threat. But for the larger issue of entitlement spending and serious budget cuts, because let's be honest, I mean, this is a lot of budget cuts that the Republicans are proposing, but this is really nothing compared to what needs to be done to
absolutely
reduce the deficit, or not forget and not even touching the idea of eliminating the $14 trillion debt. There's probably more reason to be somewhat optimistic that at least there'll be some sort of compromise there, I believe, than in the short term. Because the short term, I do think the president thinks it's all about scoring political points, and Republicans feel like it's a good issue for them.
Do we even know what the Republicans want to do and what they plan on cutting? Do they have a unified message right now where we can look at and say, oh, okay, here's where they're going? Because I'm kind of confused on that.
Short term or long term?
Both, really. I mean,
short term, I think that the Republicans do feel like that they have that this continuing resolution with 61, I think it is, $1 billion worth of cuts. Okay. That's something that they support.
And that's going to be good enough for them, and especially for their new freshmen and their Tea Party guys.
For sure, in the short term, yeah. But I think in terms of the long term, they have a problem, because there are a lot of Tea Partiers who want to talk about the bigger debt issues in terms of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, et cetera. And the House Republicans, I'm told that there is a majority of the House Republicans who want to talk about reforming entitlement spending in April when they introduce their budget. But we haven't seen any of these details yet. Everybody keeps talking about it. The only person I know of House Republicans who has actually proposed anything is Congressman Paul Ryan, and his budgets and proposals have gone nowhere the last few years.
So, it's interesting because this morning we put this out to our callers, and a lot of them who had lived through the so-called government shutdown of '95 said it is a different time. The budget is worse. The deficit is worse. More people understand it via the internet, talk radio, the various communication devices we use. And They seem to indicate that this time, if there were a veto, it wouldn't necessarily come down on the heads of Republicans, that they might blame the president. Are you sensing that at all, or is this looking like it would be deja vu all over again?
I mean, I guess it just depends on how it happens. We'll see how it plays out over the next few weeks. But you have, first of all, the debt ceiling vote in March, I believe, that is going to be a big test. And I think it depends on how much President Obama, for instance, offers, or Democrats offer a competing series of spending cuts. That has not happened yet. Right now, Republicans feel like, well, look, we're trying to cut, and he's trying to veto us. Well, if the president were to offer a counter proposal, that would be different in terms of the war over public opinion. I think the bottom line is it's ugly, and it all illustrates just how difficult President Obama. The reason I think he didn't issue his veto threat at the press conference yesterday when he could have. Is because he didn't want the images on TV to be of him issuing a veto threat. He wanted the images on TV to be him saying, come let us reason together, and I want to work with Republicans, etc. And then a few hours later he issues that veto threat. That just illustrates how difficult this is going to be. This is not, I think a lot of Americans don't know what kind of sacrifice it would be necessary to actually get the budget under control. I mean, look, we're talking about next year in President Obama's budget, the government spends $1 trillion more than it takes in. Is just and this year it's $1.6 trillion.
Well, we're spending $300 billion a month, according to a study, and $120 billion of that per month is already borrowed. So obviously, this is a ticking time bomb.
And President Obama rightly puts out that in his budget, and I know that the forecasts that he goes by 3.9% growth are very optimistic, et cetera. Sure. But in his budget, he would stop spending more than the government takes in, but I think in this 10-year kabuki of budget proposals, 10 years out, by 2017,
when he's gone.
But the government would still be spending $600 to $700 billion a year in interest on the debt. I mean, that's how screwed we are.
I know. It's unbelievable. Thank you, Jake. We always appreciate you coming on the show for your insights.
Thank you.